G'day, Jim Hart here. Wow, the subject of empathy. It's out of control online. It's, there's healthy empathy, and it's really important to have healthy empathy, to be a healthy individual, to have healthy relationships with people. But this idea that people with BPD are empaths, or people are empaths in general, as opposed to having healthy empathy. What is healthy empathy about having codependency, for example, and allowing somebody to continually abuse you in the name of, quote, love, unquote? I don't think that's healthy empathy. So if it's measured as too much empathy, then if you get into the narrative of an empath, it's invoking a special kind of victim consciousness, victim mindset, because it's not going to help people to heal or to recover or to find what is a healthy balance of empathy, or it's also not going to help people to understand the journey forward, the way forward in recovery from codependency, any kind of early childhood trauma, etc., or levels thereof, or adverse childhood experience, which people with codependency also have. So this idea that everybody's an empath all of a sudden, whether it's people with BPD or whether it's people with codependency, next thing you know, we're going to be hearing narcissists are somehow, quote, empaths, unquote. Everybody who has been traumatized in a relationship with somebody with borderline personality, everybody that's been traumatized in a relationship with a narcissist, it doesn't ipso facto make you an empath. It means you've been victimized. It means you've been traumatized. And healthy empathy is what you need to have for yourself. But this overabundance of what is it projected out? What is too much empathy? Which I think is what the empath narrative is about. People saying, well, I have too much empathy. Okay, well, what is that really then? Because that's not healthy empathy. So what is that empathy about? I wonder what people think about that. Because, it doesn't matter, what I say. Some things I say are really more grounded in absolute facts, right? And then there's opinions based on all the work I've been doing over the last 30 years with clients, etc. So, which a lot of that informs me about, and I've heard from a lot of people and clients who say that, they used to think they were an empath, and it wasn't until that they were able to let go of that label, whatever that does mean to people, because it probably doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So as they were able to let go of that label, of their own free choice and will, right, they started to then be able to do the deeper work of healing and recovery. I'm mainly talking about people with codependency now, or people that have been traumatized by somebody in a relationship with BPD, or traumatized by a narcissist. And many people, not all, with codependency might, have a cluster B parent themselves, and or a codependent parent, or one of each, or two cluster B parents. Not everyone, but a lot of people. So what I'm talking about here, and I'll be saying more about it, and sure, maybe a lot of people aren't going to agree with me. Okay, well, that's fine. But I really think that the definitions, the language, the labels, like empath, it's really just going in the wrong direction for people. And I'm not saying that people who might have or do identify with the label of empath, outside of those with active borderline personality disorder who are not recovered fully from BPD, they're not empathic. They can have times of being, they're not empaths. They have times of having empathy. But when they're triggered to emotional dysregulation, however they manifest that, however they may have learned some skills to deal with that, if they've stopped short of full recovery, they're still going to be having their own internal emotional landscape, and still somewhat unstable, if not totally unstable, or lack of sense of self, be very much reactionary, right? And reliving past trauma in their lives. And so in those moments, times, episodes, whatever you want to call them, people with BPD don't have the capacity for empathy. I mean, I think most people would agree with that when you're on the other side of somebody with BPD who is, in a fit of rage or something, I mean, are they thinking about you? Are they worried about how you feel? Do they even see you half the time? Do they even know or care how you feel? And of course, there's a wide difference across a lot of people with BPD that some people might, in those moments, know they don't because they're in such a defensive place. But I'm not saying people with BPD don't have empathy or the capability of empathy, even when empathy isn't really on the table, so to speak, due to triggered emotional dysregulation, vast misperceptions, all kinds of things that are driven by the very nature of the trauma response that BPD really is. And codependency is its own trauma response as well, as I've talked about or will talk about more, and maybe more so on websites than YouTube. But the point is anyway that this idea that people are empaths is like, so you have too much empathy, or they might say extremely empathic, or a lot of empathy. But that's not in a balanced, healthy place. Empathy is a wonderful thing in the human condition. And I mean, I'm an empathic person. I have empathy for people, but I would never want to say that I was an empath. I would never identify with the label of empath, because I hope that in my own life, as far as I know, I have healthy empathy. So I can experience what somebody else is, I can be aware and attuned to what somebody else is feeling, how they're experiencing what they're experiencing and feeling, and not be thinking about myself at all, and have empathy and see them and hear them and have compassion for them. But it's not a matter of I've got this like super load of empathy that really, healthy empathy in humanity, in people, in healthy relationships, healthy attachment styles, all of that, it's healthy. And what does that mean? Empathy is healthy. Well, it means that it's not too much. It means that you're not sacrificing yourself because you're feeling so much for the other person. So I guess the other thing I would just assert here for people to think about, if you labels are labels, right? And whatever they mean to people. But I don't know that they're helpful in any way, shape, or form, really, beyond trying to understand what does it really mean. So I think that people need to look at the fact that, maybe the whole reason why you're feeling so much for the person with BPD, or why it's so impossible for you to leave and take care of yourself, how you've lost yourself, why you're having all this abundance of empathy. Well, I shouldn't say empathy, because is it really an abundance of empathy? Or is it better to look at, perhaps, why are you holding on to someone else's feelings? Not only what would be considered maybe empathic if it was in a healthy balanced degree, right? But here's what people with codependency are doing. They are holding the cluster B's feelings, often in this case, right? More so at the cost of your own, at the cost of yourself. Holding on to and worrying about, and people think feeling and maybe feeling, not feeling, but holding and putting first other people's feelings above and beyond your own. I think it's time to question this. Is that really empathy? It's self-abandonment. It's a lack of empathy for yourself. Could it be maybe something else other than you have such an abundance of empathy that you can't stop feeling for the person who's abusing you? I just think the narrative is a troubling one. I think the narrative is one that blocks a lot of people's healing and recovery, blocks a lot of awareness in some people's cases. So I would rather think that it might be helpful to people with codependency to look at this and say, really look at why, as I do with clients, we work on these things all the time. Why are you holding other people's feelings to the detriment of yourself while they're abusing you? Is that really too much empathy? Or is that something else? So I'm not going to, well, I have ideas and I know from client work, etc., but I'm not going to just throw out what I've seen over the years or what I could establish. I just really think people should think about it. Is it really empathy? Because the echo chamber on YouTube is running amok in every which way direction, and I'm just trying hard not to be a part of that. And to keep it real, and to sometimes talk about things that might be thought-provoking, might not be the thing that you really want to hear. I'm not here to give you something you don't want to hear. I mean, that I don't want to hurt anybody in any way or anything like that. But what I'm kind of trying to show you at the same time is that there are other ways and perspectives to look at things that might help you. Maybe not. Maybe. It depends, right? Who you are, where you're at, what you think. And the other thing is, I'm not just here to be part of the YouTube echo chamber to be doing videos that just tell you what you want to hear. Because aren't there enough of those out there? So I'm here to give a gentle challenge for people to think about things and maybe start to think outside that narrative that you're stuck in, being abused in, losing yourself, getting hollowed out, being re-traumatized, being victimized, all of that. And yet, but you're having more, quote, empathy for the person who's abusing you. It's like Stockholm Syndrome. But the other thing is it really empathy? How have you lost yourself so much, not only in these relationships with cluster B, but how have you lost yourself so much from maybe a time in early childhood and some modicum or level or degree of wounding to yourself as a child, to your inner child now, that you were taught how to abandon yourself, and that's what you continue to do. Should we really be calling that, quote, too much empathy, unquote? I think that's rather something else. And that's something else that people might want to take a look at, if you're ready to, is something that can really help you to move forward in a healing and recovery journey. So empathy is really important. I'm not against empathy. I think, empathy is really important for healthy adult relationships of mutuality and reciprocity. But when mutuality and reciprocity and emotional availability and that connectedness in a healthy bonded way isn't present in a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist or whomever, then how is it really too much empathy? What is it that you're really doing and why? People with codependency need to understand a lot more about that. So I hope you give it some thought. And it's not a blanket statement I'm making. It's just a statement based on what healthy empathy is and how people with codependency, people with BPD aren't empaths, and people with codependency, the empath narrative is a misnomer. It is misleading. It is a special invocation of a victim mindset unconsciously. And many clients I work with, they come to realize this, or even people watching my channel have said in live streams, they come to realize this, and then they can take a look at themselves and start to shift the focus, which people deserve to do. You can only be responsible for your own self in this life and what you do and what your choices are and how you need to take care of yourself, as well as then, yes, connect with others, etc., but in healthy ways, not in these codependent ways that people are doing it. So I would just say one more time, think about it. Is it really too much empathy, or is there maybe like levels of secondary and third and maybe fourth degrees of what psychology terms, like secondary payoff gains of, like some people think codependency is altruistic. No, but maybe that's a way that some people who think that can boost their self-esteem or their self-worth for a time by thinking something that really isn't factual or going to help them in the case of just basic human psychology and what's emotionally healthy for people. Haven't we really lost sight of that? At least on YouTube in the echo chamber. I'm trying hard to stay out of the echo chamber. So again, I'm not just here to say what everybody else is saying, because I don't happen to think like everybody else. It's not a right or wrong proposition. I just want to help people to explore things. And I know that some of this exploration really informed me in my recovery journey in the past. And I think it's really important to note that there's all kinds of reasons why codependents are self-sacrificing, are over concerned and burdened by other people's feelings, and specifically what people think about them or will think about them. Like people on the channel here have written comments about, well, if I just go no contact from a borderline or narcissist and I don't tell them, aren't I just ghosting them? It's like, what? No. What about you? What about self-care? What about this empathy that everybody's empath on steroids? What about the fact that you don't even have empathy for yourself? Don't you see that as an issue? Anyway, I hope that was helpful or food for thought. And, if you don't like what I'm saying, well, you don't have to agree with me. I'm just putting it out there to, suggest to people that there might be another way forward, and to be careful of labels and what does being an empath even mean, and why do people take that on, and how much can it be a protection versus a way to find what's really happening for you if you have codependency and you're continually giving all your energy, all your empathy, all your everything to the person that's abusing you, to the sacrifice of yourself, to the abandonment of yourself. What about empathy for you?